This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at Mubi.com/Karsten. Hey chumps, how's it going? Welcome to another episode of What I Watched This Month, August edition. I'm recording this from my Airbnb in Stockholm, which is my way of saying I didn't watch a ton this month because I've been traveling. I started this month with The Sword of Doom. This is a Japanese samurai movie that basically feels like American Psycho before American Psycho. This guy just can't stop killing people, and watching him slowly pay the consequences was in some ways satisfying and in other ways extremely dark. Like most Japanese films from the 60s, this ends on a note that made me question everything in my life and really unsettled me. It's an extremely violent film shot just so beautifully, and I've seriously been thinking about it all month. Please check this one out. Then I watched another masterpiece called The Hole. I'm still pretty new to Simon Lang, but I gotta say this is my favorite of his so far. It is insane how this is the best movie about a pandemic, and it came out in 1998. I have not seen a movie depicting loneliness this vividly before, let alone in the context of a quarantine. Also, it's a musical, which for Simon Lang weirdly works. If I watched this in 2020, it might have destroyed me. I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while. Then I watched Blue Collar. It is wild that this is Paul Schrader's directorial debut because man does this already feel extremely confident and extremely him. It amazes me how controlled every frame feels considering the behind the scenes of this film was apparently hellish. But speaking only about the film itself, this kind of blends a lot of Schrader's best tropes into one film. It's an unforgivingly bleak look at American capitalism with lots of great humor and a few scenes that permanently scarred me. It has an ending that makes you want to rewatch the whole thing. It is extremely cynical in a good way. There's a reason he's one of the greats, and this is one of the good ones. And I watched The Alpinist. Marc-Andre Leclerc is a fascinating documentary subject and an incredibly inspiring person. This documentary just doesn't deserve him. I have mixed feelings because I do think it does a decent job at showing Leclerc in an authentic light that really gets across how inspiring of a person he is. I think him and his accomplishments are nothing short of astounding, and it's the only reason this film is even a little bit likable. I think the best way to see how awful the filmmakers handled this story is to see just how well the filmmakers handled Free Solo. That's a documentary that, no matter how unlikable it portrays its subject, always respected his boundaries, as his climbing, that the documentary wouldn't exist without, should absolutely come first. This movie doesn't feel like for a second it actually respects its subject, and if it does, it only uses him for its own good. I haven't seen a more insensitive, simple-minded, and just flat-out intrusive documentary filmmaker. I thought this was a very infuriating documentary with dogshit editing and an emotionally manipulative tone that left a bad taste in my mouth. A better documentary wouldn't insist on invading the privacy of its subject, but would instead find a way of informing the audience of their significance from a respectable and ethical distance. I hated this documentary. Then I watched Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. As mentioned in my video, I really liked this movie, and the more time has passed, the more I like it. I think it's just plain fun, but also one of the better satires about Gen Z that I've seen. One that never made me roll my eyes at it, but knew exactly how to have fun with the subject at the same time, which is kind of a miracle that it worked as well as it ended up working. Rachel Sennett is a star, and Lena Wilson is a certified weirdo. Then I watched Bullet Train. As mentioned in that video, I didn't love this. I did have a good time, and I think it's great to see something this weird and this original in theaters. The flashy cinematography and performances were just a blast to watch, but the writing was so unbearably unfunny and interfering that it really kept me from actually loving this movie. Then I watched Spy. I know it's really easy to shit on Melissa McCarthy because she has definitely made a lot of bad movies, but I feel like we forgot that she can crank out a hit if she wants, and Spy is one of them. I think this movie is very funny and very entertaining, clearly made by someone who understands momentum and timing required to make a bit land, and not let that bit interfere with the plot if it doesn't land. I just think this is a really well-made film. I laughed, and that's all I wanted. Then I watched Prey. I enjoyed this. Maybe not as much as a lot of people, but I enjoyed it. It's a lot more cinematically interesting than I expected a Predator movie to be. I mean, some of these shots are just flat out gorgeous. And the sound design, do I even need to say anything about that? I haven't really seen any Predator movies, so I can't really compare it to anything. It's also maybe why I didn't love it the way some people do. I know a lot of them are bad, so I guess if I were used to bad movies, this would feel like the greatest thing in the world. But speaking on this movie in itself, I think it has a lot of interesting things to say. But I mean, this was really well made, it was really gorgeous, and the action is done really well. CGI doesn't always look fantastic, but you know, we'll take what we can get. And I watched Normal People, and oh my goodness gracious. I kind of started this not thinking it'd win me over. The first 2 episodes really did close to nothing for me, and I was like, I'll just finish it to finish it. But then something clicked, and this was everything to me for 2 days straight. Having read the book, I gotta say, I really love the way it was adapted. I think Paul Mescal and Daisy Edgar-Jones both do a phenomenal job at bringing their characters to life. The cold, bleak style really enhances the feeling of emptiness felt throughout the show. And the ending. I love the ending. I thought it was an amazing choice choice, and it was handled so beautifully. My enjoyment for this is a mix of the fact that it's just simply really well made, but also that I resonated with almost everything about this. And if you don't feel like a personal connection to this, I can see you feeling kind of numb to the whole thing. I don't blame you for that, but I thought this was a really well-made show with really great performances, really great direction. Don't think I can ever watch this one again because the first watch broke me to pieces, but great show. Then I watched We Met in Virtual Reality. This is a documentary about VR chat filmed entirely in VR chat, and while it may seem gimmicky on the surface, this is an incredible documentary about the digital age and the ways in which we find community in online spaces. It balances the tone of being both very self-aware at how goofy it all looks while still showing so much respect for its subjects. The choice to keep this entirely in VR chat might be a little exhausting to some people. The visual style certainly doesn't look great, but I think it's entirely necessary in hammering home the idea that you can be who you want in here and the real you is completely irrelevant, which made for a really fascinating documentary that I'm sure would spark up a lot of interesting discussions. Please don't just write this off because it looks cringy. It's very moving. Then I rewatched The Host. Obviously Parasitus is best, but goddamn if this doesn't come close. The Host is such a terrifying and bleak movie to watch, especially after the last 2 years, but in that, as usual, there is a lot of heart that makes it beyond just a normal creature flick. The CGI looks awful, and it's still a good movie. What does that say? And I rewatched Everything Everywhere All at Once. Man, I really thought this would be a Matrix situation, and the second time I watched it, everything would really click. And while I still very much appreciate and agree with everything this film is saying, I can't help but feel disconnected in the back half of it. The first half is perfection, and some of the coolest filmmaking I've ever seen. It's everything I love about movies. The Daniels clearly have a very unique vision that I will continue watching and appreciating for the rest of their career. But the second half is just plain exhausting in my opinion, and a lot of the quirky humor just doesn't really do it for me. I'm still able to take it seriously, and I do feel a lot of what the film wants me to feel. There's a disconnect. It's still a really inspiring and breathtaking piece of work to behold. I do recommend checking it out a second time just to pick up on all the stuff in the beginning. It just doesn't stick the landing for a guy like me, unfortunately. And I watched Fire of Love. This was cute. Lava is insanely cool to look at, and the footage they managed to get in this documentary needs to be viewed on the big screen. It is breathtaking. Miranda July's narration gets a little exhausting after a while. She always sounds like she's about to break into tears, and I wish I felt a little bit more about these two by the end of the movie, but it's still a very fascinating watch, and I learned a thing or two. Then I watched The Rehearsal, and my goodness, I'm sure I don't need to be the one to tell you this, but what a phenomenal show. I have not laughed this hard at a show in ever. It's truly psychotic behavior going on here, and I could watch it all day. I was genuinely depressed when I finished the season. I think the discourse on whether or not Nathan Fielder is exploitative has been kind of funny to watch unfold, seeing as though the show itself is literally about the man working through that. I think the way the show is analyzing the ethics of this whole situation is both hilarious and more nuanced than most people are used to, myself included. Just going as far as being like, child labor laws prevent us from using the same kid, so we have to switch them out every 4 hours. It's genius. But then it like uses that bit in a way that's just like it broke my heart, is what I'm saying. It broke my heart in the end. And it's made for one of the most fascinating things I've seen in a while, and something way more existential than I was expecting. There's a lot more to be said about this show that honestly deserves its own video, but for now I'll just say, if you haven't been watching this, what are you doing? I've also been rewatching Breaking Bad for the 9th time. This show is a lot funnier than I remember it being, and it's a lot more addicting than I remember it being. I talk big game about Succession, but no, this is definitely the best show ever made. I promise I'll get to Better Call Saul eventually. I've read your comments. Just give me some time. And hey, that's what I watched this month. But hey, what'd you watch this month? Let me know. And if you're looking for something to watch next month, you can check out this week's sponsor, Mubi. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, and incredible cinema. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. And with Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected, so it's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. That's right, if you don't get to go to the fall festivals this year, Mubi's got your back with a ton of amazing selections. I'm a big fan of Mubi just because, yeah, it's overwhelming trying to find something to watch every night. And the cool thing about Mubi is that every film on their site was hand-selected, like I said, by an actual person who thought it was worth your time. So there's a lot more trust and guidance with the whole process. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/Karsten. That's mubi.com/Karsten for a whole month of amazing cinema for free.